Week 3 of university. It's hectic. It's going, yeah, okay. But this month, half out of school, half in school, I actually finished a lot more books than I thought I would. So, yeah. Number one, That Can Be Arranged by Huda from Yes, I'm Hot in This. She's a cartoonist and I adore her, and I read her first comic book, and this one, oh my gosh, I will grab anything she reads. I love her humor so much. This was just so beautiful. It wasn't short clips like her other comic books. It was one whole story about how she found love and the Islamic way of dating, and how she liked it and then didn't want to do it and then found the truth in it. And it was just so cool to read. And she made a comparison to Jane Austen and how she adored Jane Austen and the courtship in that way, having supervised meetings, and it's a little bit more arranged, and you don't meet and know each other for like 2 years before you get married, and how that courtship was so similar to the Islamic way of courtship. And Huda just, that, I never noticed that, and that blew my mind, because people view this Islamic way of dating and marriage very foreign and weird. But then, if you watch a period drama and they're in pretty gowns and things, then it's perfectly fine and it's romantic and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. Anyway, I really, really adored this, and it's just made me think a lot more about not just this way of courtship, but just meeting people and finding connections in general. Like, it's just so cool, and I'm so happy for Huda and her current husband. Hello. Anyway, I loved it. I adored it. She most recently put out another comic book called Huda F Are You, which I think is so cute, and I will definitely pick that up eventually. I also technically read Tommy Orange's There There. Like, I finished it in this month, but I read most of it in, how does the months work? In July. And so, I talked about it then when I got attacked by a caterpillar. Also, that shirt is very nice. I have no idea where that shirt is anymore. Anyway, I read another graphic novel, Your Black Friend and Other Strangers, and in the introduction part, the author says, "These comics won't make total sense to anyone other than a particular group of sweaty punks who know how to claw hammer but won't admit it. But I hope you enjoy them anyway." I don't even know what that grouping of words means, but I guess it was true, because some of these comics I really had no idea what was going on. I still adored them and enjoyed them, but yeah. And the ones that I did understand, they were just so powerful and poignant, and this was written during like Trump's reign in the US, and so kind of critiquing a lot about that and how it affected society and how people communicate, and like the Black Lives Matter movements are in here as well. And it was just so awesome. And the art, oh my gosh, if you flip through it, you would probably think it's like a compilation of artists, but it's all this one person, and it's just so amazing and epic, and didn't really understand it, but that's okay. I then read The Power, which I found out because when I was in New York with Jéla and we went to a bookstore, I think Housing Works, and all of the books are donated, and they use the funds from the books to help the homeless population in the city and also against AIDS. Anyway, they're doing really great work. Jéla found this, and I had no idea what it was, but she told me it was people start getting magic powers, but only women and girls have them, which sounds super cool. And Rachel from Let Me in the Library really, really loves this. So while I was reading it, I was texting her, and I listened to it on audiobook at first, so I was kind of confused in certain parts because it's just formatted in a specific way. So I think if you read the physical book, it would make more sense. And also, there are artifacts in the book that I wasn't aware of. Like, it kind of describes it and says the little caption part, but I still didn't really get it. So I really, really want to read this physically to fully understand. Yeah. I thought it would be kind of, women get powers, and then there's this matriarchy, and this is how the world functions, and blah, 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 the end. But it was so much more intense and, like, real. It talks about how if women really did get this overwhelming power in a patriarchal society, what would actually happen. It's not like women can just take over and they're going to give up so easily. There's a lot of fighting and shame around this, having this magic power. It was just so intense, and war and all of these things. And the middle part, I feel like, was a little bit messy and repetitive, and I got kind of lost there, but then the end wrapped it up so beautifully, and the way that it zooms out from... Okay, the format of this story is we're currently living in this matriarchal society, and some man historian is looking back at all of these artifacts and trying to piece together what happened in history and trying to reveal the truth of how society came to be as it is today in this day, and is writing a book about it. So the front is about him talking to this editor, reviewer person, and then goes into the book, within the book, the history book that he's writing, and then at the end goes back into her feedback and then him talking about it, and it's just so... that part made the book for me. Like, that made it so much more powerful, and just to see the zooming out and the zooming in, and also throughout the history, seeing how these power dynamics change and the influence of perceiving people as weak and how it pushes them to even act a certain way, like it's not an inherent thing. There was just so much that was so epic. And also, okay, I think it covered non-binary intersex people, because I think there was something about the governor's daughter's boyfriend that I thought was because of like intersex people, because intersex people make up a large portion of the population, like much more than many people expect. I think there's a statistic like there are as many intersex people as there are redheads, like the proportion of the population is the same. I loved that in this book where they say only females have this power in their DNA, that it also talked about intersex people and how it would affect them. This is what I thought. But then I brought this up to two friends who read the book, and they were like, what? They didn't catch that? Or maybe I just made assumptions and made it up? I have no idea. Please let me know. Hello. Hi. I thought there would be nobody here during the middle of the day. Anyway, I adore this book. I will read it again physically. Ariel read this book, and he loved it. And he hasn't liked in any of the recommendations that the collective booktube has given him through me. We gotta work on it. But speaking of rereading, I reread 2 books this month, which I basically never reread books, so this was very rare for me. I reread The Empress of Salt and Fortune, which I only read back in May or something, and I listened to it on audiobook because I thought it would transfer really well to audiobook, and it did. The voices were amazing, and I just think even if I were to reread this on paper, I think I would love it a lot more, because I was so confused the first time I read it. I still adored it. I think every time I read it, I would notice different things and piece the puzzle together better. When I listened to the audiobook, everything was just coming together, and the visuals, the descriptive language was so beautiful, and I adored this book. It was so confusing, but it's a book that I think you could read over and over again, and it's very short, so... Next book that I reread was When My Name Was Keoko, which, oh my gosh, I feel like I have completed my mission in life. Like, so many more people read this book, never heard of this book, and then read this book, and then loved this book. Like, oh my gosh. It just warms my heart that so many people read the book, that so many people came to the live show and just enjoyed the book and loved the book and learned so much about this history. It was like watching everyone go through the same process that I went through when I was in middle school, and then also just rereading this book now. This is such a good book. This is such a good book. It's written in such a digestible manner, and it's for middle grade, so it's not going to be super gruesome, but still covers the really harsh realities of what happened, and it's just written so well, and every single scene in that book belongs in that book. There's no part where I was like, yeah, just skip over this part, or that I felt was unnecessary or pushing things. Like, I adore that book. Did I tell what books were about? This book, if you haven't heard me talk about it already, takes place in Korea during World War II, when Japan occupies much of Korea, and also they occupied parts of China. Colonial Japan was doing a lot of really bad things at the time. This covers this one Korean family where one of the things that they had to do was change their name to Japanese names, so that's why it's called When My Name Was Keoko, and it just covers how much the restrictions grew within this short period, and then at the end is the liberation, which was August 15th. Yay! It's told in 2 perspectives. The family dynamics were so beautiful and so real, and Everything. Oh my gosh. And in the live show, like, people were talking about certain scenes and telling what scenes really, like, pulled on their heartstrings and things. And that was just, oh, it was just so cool to hear so many people have this book hit them so deeply. And oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Another graphic novel, Melody, the story of a nude dancer. And I adored this. I read it all in one sitting, and it was so beautiful. And I just saw this on a shelf in my library, and I was like, it's just so cool. It's about Melody. She is in a relationship with an abusive man, and he tells her to start dancing at this club to earn money while he is doing illegal things and being dumb. And it's told in short strips. If you see all of the little gray lines, they were published by her bit by bit in French, and then somebody found it and wanted to bring it to the US and translate it, and that man is named something. Chris Ware. I adored this story. I thought it was so beautiful. It's just her. She's such a good storyteller, and just telling this how it is and not in like a crude way or anything. Just her experiences with this, and it was so beautiful. However, I started reading reviews of it, and a big criticism they have is about this, what was his name? Chris Ware person. In the introduction, he talks about how it's not crude, and he talks about how it's so cool that the childish amateur cartoon style mixed with this heavy topic, and then her straightforward, naive storytelling mixes so well and just tells this honest, real story. I don't remember where this sentence was going, but yeah, he basically describes Sylvie Rancourt as this naive person who just was like doodling and created this comic, and a lot of the critiques were about how he... what's the word? I didn't read much as a child. My vocabulary is not very good. But how he viewed her as smaller and little and young, when actually she's a brilliant storyteller, and like each of these stories are so powerful and wonderful, and she's not just a naive person walking through life being straightforward. She knows what she's doing, and she's super smart, and she makes bad decisions, but like, she's just living life, and it's so beautiful. I adored it. I support Sylvie Rancourt, and maybe not so much Chris Ware. But yeah, this was beautiful and so cool, and just so many cool perspectives, and yeah. Yay! And on audiobook, I read The Marrow, Thieves, which I think is one of the first books that I heard about through BookTube, but then never read it, like year and a half ago, from This Story Ain't Over for readin for Canadian authors and things. Very cute. Yes, I finally got around to reading it, and the audiobook was so cool. Like, it had spooky sounds and like running through the forest and kind of like eerie sound. It creeped me out. One time I was listening to it at like 2 a.m. and I had to stop. But it was very beautiful. The voices were wonderful. The storytelling, the characters, oh my gosh. It was just such a beautiful story about this found family and survival and going through all of these things. Okay, I think the main thing was just the relationships between these people in this found family. That's the main group of this book. It was just so amazing, and all of the things that they go through, and the pain, and the identity conflicts within themselves. I didn't really get the ending. It just felt like... Does that make sense? What did I just do? I still thought it was a beautiful book. Also, a lot of the time when I read a book and I stop a lot or have a big break in the middle, I kind of view the book lower. That's a common thing, right? Like, if you read a book all in one sitting, you're like, this is amazing. But then if you read it spread out, then you kind of forget things and the book becomes less appealing. That's a thing, right? That's not just a me thing. Well, after school started, and I also listened to it in like little bits and pieces whenever I could. But whenever I did, it was so engaging and written so beautifully, read so beautifully, and yeah, it was a phenomenally written book. Last one, the book that I just finished, Dial A for Aunties. I read this with Yasmin and Hannah, and it was super fun. And when we finished it, we started fan casting, and one of the messages, trying to cast the main character, Medi, sending pictures to each other and being like, no, she doesn't look right for the character. She looks a little bit too vain and classy to be Medi. And then mentioning another actor and looking at photos of her and being like, yeah, she looks like she definitely would accidentally murder someone. It's an interesting thing to discuss. discuss. Dial A for Aunties, main character, Medi, as you may have guessed, she accidentally murders a man. A lot of complicated things happen. Basically, she ends up deciding not to go to the police, and then because of justice system being stupid and things, she now has to hide the body. And so she calls her mom and asks her mom to help, and the mom is like, oh, okay, let me call your aunts. And then she calls the aunts, and just all of the aunties, like, just the vibes, and they're just like, okay, do you have any fruit so we could eat while we, like, discuss this? And trying to impress each other and one-up each other and things is just, oh yeah, it's a dead corpse, but let me, like, figure out how to one-up my sister, and, like, being very extreme in that. You know, I feel like they're just living life, like, they moved to America and have survived everything, and they're just taking what life throws at them, not being like, oh my gosh, there's a dead corpse. It's just like, okay, we have a dead corpse. What do we do next? Let's get these things done. And it was just very funny. However, a big thing that we were all talking about is there's a love story in here between Medi and, like, her college boyfriend who she was separated from, and, like, oh my gosh, the love of her life, blah, 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 blah. It was very weird for it to go back and forth between, oh, this is the love of my life, he's so beautiful, his smile makes me melt, oh, there's a dead corpse rotting in my bed. And it just flipped back and forth a lot, and very sharply, and it was just like, what is happening? What is happening? I mean, I guess that's how her life is going, but it's just like, what are we doing? I also don't really approve of this love story. Like, I don't know if they should be with each other, and I just think it's stupid. I mean, they haven't seen each other for 5 years or whatever, and they're like, oh my gosh, I love you so much, and you're the only person I think about, and I've never dated anyone else, and blah, blah, blah. And it just seems very silly and based off nothing. Yeah. And then there's another couple at the end of the book, which, you know, equality. And I also don't like this couple. I see no reason why they should be together. I think communication was very poor, and I don't know. Is this me hating on love, or am I valid in not liking either of these couples? Anyway, but it was a very, very fun book to read. Like, I read it so fast. I went to my first football game in university, and I hated it. First of all, it was super, super sunny and sweating. I was wearing my Kingfisher shirt to promote the new mascot, because the old mascot was taken away in 2007, but people still wear the merch, and people still chant Chief when you should not chant Chief during the middle of this song, and the chancellor of our school is doing nothing about it. And anyway, I was only really there for my friends in the marching band, and, you know, how am I gonna entertain myself for, like, this 2-hour football game? More than 2 hours. I left after halftime show, but how am I gonna entertain myself? What? So I brought Dial A for Aunties while I was there, and it was amazing.
Dana, how's that book?
Also, Jessie Sutanto writes in the introduction about how she kept the aunties' broken English, and how, oh my gosh, the line that she says, their grasp of the English language is not a reflection of their intelligence, but a reflection of the sacrifice that they have made for us. Goosebumps. This is just part of who they are, and it was so wonderful. And there's this one line that I read during the football game, and then I read aloud to everyone because I think it's so representative of this entire book and just the aunt's perspective. You're not a mess. You just killed by accident only. Bad luck. Can happen to anyone. Yeah. That's this entire book story. It was super fun to read, except for the couples part. I didn't care about that part. But also, would it have been as interesting and dramatic and over the top if that didn't happen, if it was just about the murder? Oh, another book that I'm super, super enjoying right now is a book that I mentioned in my mid-year book freakout tag. Sometimes I trip on how happy we could be, and at first I thought it was going to be some stupid, sappy love story about how she lost the love of her life and obsessively thinks about how happy their life could have been together. However, it's not. It's about one bold black Southern woman and her experiences with media, and it's just, oh my gosh. From the first chapter, it was so amazing and so beautiful, and she says so many things. I'm so excited to finish this book. I'm on page like 120. How many pages are there in total? I have no idea. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And I have so many other new books, and also just like books in general from the library that I need to read eventually. I also owe a lot of money to the library. I pay my fines. I just also return my books late. A lot. Very often. You know, I take responsibility for my actions, but my actions are not always very smart actions. Sometimes I'll owe like $4.70 and I'll give a $5 bill and be like, keep the change. I am just high energy, just meeting people, seeing people, hanging out with my friends more, meeting new friends, making new friends, seeing people in class, waiting in the hallway outside for the instructor to let us in. Like, I was bouncing up and down the first day, like, we're all in the hallway waiting for in-person class. And they were like, yep. Uh-huh. But anyway, I will go return these books to the library. I'll pay my fine. And bye-bye! Okay.